Welcome to this episode of Estate Agency X. Today I'm talking to Mark from Nicholson Estate Agents, and I really want to dig into his journey as he started his estate agency not so long ago. He's tried out a few different softwares, he's now using the Lifecycle system, and I want to just dig into a bit about his background, a bit about some of the struggles that they faced and how they got through them and where the company is now. So thanks for coming in today, Mark.
No problem, Mark. Thanks for inviting me.
To start with, are you all right just to give a bit of a background on how you got into agency, how you ended up starting the company, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was a long road into agency. Actually, I started as a pig farmer, so very different from estate agency. And
you
from
could say it's the same sort of thing.
yeah, perhaps. From that, I got into sales in general, which was through the motor trade. And back in the recession, when that was biting, 2012, 2013, a friend of mine who was in the motor trade at that time went to set up a property auctioneering company with a business partner that had some experience in it. At that time, things were pretty tough in the motor trade, and particularly in the area of the motor trade that I was working in. So the chap that I knew actually invited me to go and start to do a little bit of work for them. And essentially that involved knocking on doors. I was the chief door knocker. They'd set up this property auctioneering firm, and their main way of acquiring clients was to go and knock on doors of properties that had been on the market for more than 3 months and then sell to them the idea of auction. And back in 2012, 2013, actually, it wasn't unusual for a property to be sat on the market for 6, 12, 18, 24 months in our area.
Yeah.
So it was a relatively easy sell. I didn't end up just knocking on the doors of the ones that were on for 3 months. I knocked on every door.
Yeah.
What happened from that is that via a mutual acquaintance, the gentleman that owns one of the biggest estate agents in the town that I live in and I was working in, got into contact with me, and basically he was fed up of picking up compliment slips that'd say, give me a call, I need to talk about your property marketing. And he basically said that the best way for him to deal with me was for him to give me a job. So I went from the motor trade to knocking on doors to being the sales manager and valuer of one of the biggest estate agents in town with pretty much little or next to no experience. And that was really my route into it. So, but it very quickly, I felt like I was a round peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. And I stayed there for a few years before moving on from there. I had a year with Purple Bricks, and then we started Nicholson's.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. So what just out of interest there, before I move on to the next question, what made you decide you were going to leave the auction company and go to the estate agents?
Because with the auction company I was self-employed. Right. Essentially I got 50 quid for an in for the valuer there.
Yeah. Tough job.
Yeah, it was a tough job. I had my other half at home, had my first child at that time, right. Young child as well, and actually what I was looking for then was security of a salary. We were looking to buy our first home together, so that was really why I went from working in the auctioneering side of things as self-employed into being employed.
Okay. Interesting, because then you took the jump back to self-employed with Purple Bricks.
Yeah, that's right.
What made you decide to do that?
Well, I've always been quite entrepreneurial. When I left the motor trade, I was running my own company there. I then, when the first child was born, we set up an online business that sold through Amazon and eBay stores. That was supposed to be my other half's business, but it turned out it was me that was doing all of the legwork for it. I always wanted to work for myself. The chap that employed me as a sales manager and valuer, ultimately the relationship between him and I broke down, and I was looking for a way out. And at that time, Purple Bricks looked like a good option where I could earn better money than what I had at the time.
Yeah.
and also, you know, if I'm being honest, to piss him off because it was the agent that he hated the most.
Okay, so you went to Purple Bricks and, you know, worked there for a while. Then what made you decide you were going to open your own agency?
Yeah. Well, when I went to Purple Bricks, I'd been given some numbers and some promises of the numbers of valuations that they'd drive into the diary every month, and actually what I'd got was nothing like what had been promised. The income was up and down, it wasn't consistent, and by that time it wasn't one child, it was 3 kids.
Right.
So I was a little bit unhappy with, you know, some months earning fantastic levels of income, other months earning pretty poor levels of income. And I knew a surveyor who's also called Mark, and he'd been out and he'd valued or done a mortgage valuation for a property that I was selling that was actually my auntie and uncle's house. And we got a great price for this house, and I was a little bit worried that it'd get downvalued. So I had a conversation with Mark, who I'd known throughout my time in estate agency career. And in the back of my mind, I was going to ask him at the end of the conversation, Mark, have you got an appetite for setting up a hybrid estate agency in Retford? But before I could do that, when we got to the end of the conversation, Mark said to me, Mark, when are you going to leave Purple Bricks and come and set up an estate agency with me in Retford? So my jaw just dropped to the floor, and I just couldn't believe that, you know, that conversation had happened, and obviously we were both on the same wavelength. So we got together, we discussed it, the pros and cons of having a high street office or not, you know, the sort of online fixed fee option or no sell, no fee, commission based option. And Nicholson's was born. So Mark's a 50% business partner with me, and to be honest with you, I couldn't have done it without Mark. You know, financially, he was the one that backed me. You know, I didn't have the funding with 3 kids and, you know, a wife at home that doesn't work, looks after the children. So I owe pretty much everything that where we're at the moment to Mark.
And when was that then? When did that happen?
So that happened in the summer of 2019, that conversation. We started to set the company up in the October, and we launched on Mad Friday, the Friday before Christmas, in 2019.
Okay.
Obviously, was you know, in hindsight, thinking back to what happened a few months after. It was an unusual time.
Okay, so you've set up this new agency now, with obviously the excitement and the also the fear that anyone would have starting a new business. You know, thinking it's got to go well, but what if it doesn't, and all of those worries. I think, if I remember rightly, I might be wrong, but when we first spoke was probably around the sort of middle of just the start of 2020.
It was actually, it was during the first lockdown.
Right, March, April time, 2020.
Yeah, that sort of time.
And in terms of like the operations in that estate agents that you'd set up, what software were you using, and what were the kind of everyday processes like? Were you still knocking on doors? Like, how was it working generally? Yeah,
the software that we were using was one that was the website company. It was the back end there. It was they predominantly produce estate agency websites and had a very basic CRM system. You know, enter your clients' details, enter your viewers' details. It linked in with the diary, sent them both an email, and you know, essentially it was just me and a desk and a computer. By that time, we didn't do any door knocking, we didn't do any leaflets. Over the years that I'd had before in estate agency, I was the first agent in town to adopt video on social media. And it started with a selfie stick with a wavy mobile phone on the end, flapping in the wind. But because of that, I'd got behind me quite a decent following of people that had liked the page when I was back at the traditional high street estate agents. when I went to Purple Bricks, I set up my own page. And then I'd had sort of 12 to 18 months of having that page open, people realising that actually I'd moved and I already had, you know, a good audience. And to be honest with you, it was through that audience that, you know, we managed to get traction. To do the right thing by the clients that I had at Purple Bricks. You know, the first properties that I put on the market were the ones that I'd had at Purple Bricks that were still on sale there. So we didn't start from a standing start.
Yeah.
We were already walking. We had, you know, 15 or 16 boards, can't remember the exact number, that were up around town. So actually it looked like a new estate agency had arrived, and actually we had a bit of a presence.
Yeah.
Plus with, you know, promoting that through social media, it didn't take long before we were getting invited out to valuations in, you know, in our own right. Okay.
And then if I remember rightly, you had a spell with Agent Hub or the Salesforce system.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if that was a long thing or if that was a short thing, but ultimately at some point you found Iceberg Lifecycle. So the reason I'm asking that is because if for whatever reason things hadn't gone well previously with a software, you must have been a little bit concerned that maybe the next one wouldn't have gone as well also.
I mean, it became apparent that the one that we were using that worked to the back end of the website was too basic in its functions to satisfy what we needed. So I then saw a YouTube video with you on Estate Agency X, and I watched that for an hour, and to be honest, it like blew my mind. I then made an inquiry with you guys, obviously realised at that time that Lifecycle wasn't a CRM system. And I looked for an alternative, and I came across a company who made an awful lot of promises, but unfortunately didn't deliver. You know, they basically, you know, at that time I'd had my mindset that I wanted a Lifecycle like system. And basically these guys, say we can customize it, make it however you want, we can make it do whatever you want, you know, nothing's too much trouble. So we took that on, but it became very evident very quickly that what had been promised wasn't what was being delivered. It took an awful long time to try and get it how we were asking for the system to work, and in fact we never got there. At which point, to be fair, I just got pissed off with it and thought, do you know what, we should have just done this right the first time around.
I guess, to be fair to them, it's difficult, isn't it, because you've got to, it's someone who says we can do anything, we can customise anything. You've got to first of all have the ideas, and then you've got to somehow get it across to them without anything being lost in translation, and then they've got to build what they thought you wanted, even though you might not have told them every single little thing. And that's, you know, it's interesting because, you know, as you'll know, come to Lifecycle, it's almost the opposite. It's like, well, we want it to do this. We say, no, you can't. It's just the years of, you know, we've been in that boat. We've been in that situation of, you know what, it can't be that hard. We should do this for one client, and then we should do something else for somebody else. Before you know it, it's spaghetti junction, and some unforeseen circumstances arise, and everyone has a major issue. So you've gone through this sort of process whereby you've started the company, hoping that things are going to go well. You've got a bit of a starting block because you've got a few boards up, and but I'm imagining, you know, the money's not rolling in at that point. You've tried one software, it hasn't gone well. You like the look of Lifecycle, but you know it's not the cheapest of products. So there must have been a point in your mind where you was thinking, like, it does look. I mean, I love the look of a Ferrari, but you know I'm not going to go and buy one. So must have been that little thing in your mind as to, like, I don't want to waste a load of money here, especially seeing as you've got a business partner as well that, you know, ultimately is going to want to know why you've chosen this system. What kind of pushed you over the edge to you thinking, like, all right, I'll take the plunge and do this?
I think it was the problems that we were having with the CRM system that we moved to. And at that point, it had gone from me and a desk and a phone to having me and a member of staff working for me. And what we wanted to do is, make sure that the data that we were getting and putting into the system was being used properly. And we really wanted to expand and build on that. And I could see that something like Lifecycle, what that would do for us 18, 24, 36 months further down the line. And I just wasn't getting, what I was looking for in the existing product. So at that time, we'd started to get some fees coming in. And I just thought, you know what, let's take the plunge. Should have done it from the start.
Okay, so at that point, as you said, Lifecycle was more around the marketing side of things.
Correct, yeah.
It did a few things that obviously everyday agents would do, like put market appraisals in there. But it was only around June time that we then launched the CRM functions into Lifecycle. And working in Lifecycle is very different to working in a normal estate agency CRM, the one that you might have used when you worked, on the high street for that chat before, or in any of the other roles. So how have you and the team found, what sort of challenges did you face in terms of adoption and working this way, whereby it's not just about today, it's about 6 months, 12 months, and making sure that we are making the most of our opportunities?
Yeah, sure. So there has been some difficulties, initially getting as much data over from one to the other. Also getting the team to buy into, getting the data right and getting it in every time, making sure everyone's contact records or contact cards are accurate, and not just putting in a name, just the address and then booking them in for a viewing. So making sure that the data that we're collecting is accurate. That's been difficult. Getting people to work in a slightly different way, coming from the traditional Dupixes, Vibras, that they're used to working with, to working with something that's completely different. But we've got there now.
Yeah.
Only really just, but we've got there now. Everything's in the Lifecycle system, and we can really now start to see, the benefits that having it in that system gives.
From the staff's perspective, you mentioned about getting them to understand the idea, because you obviously, going all the way back, watched an hour-long Estate Agency X, and it just clicked for you. You mentioned at the start you've got that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. It's your business, so you're thinking 6, 12, 18, 24, even 5 years down the line. How did you manage to get the staff to understand that, when their main focus is, I just want to book a viewing. I don't care that you're trying to build data so that your life's easier in 2 years. I just want to book a viewing.
It was difficult. One member of staff that I've got has got a lot of estate agency background and didn't really understand. But his old employer's also in town. He had a bad run with that employer towards the end, and he's really keen to beat that agent on market share.
Right.
So all I had to do is basically show him the way in which Lifecycle could, in the medium to longer term, actually put us in a much stronger position to be able to achieve his aspirations. Of delivering the market share and getting ahead of his last employer. The other member of staff that I've got at the moment, we're only a relatively small team of 3 people. She's totally new to the industry,
right?
And just like a sponge, she's just absorbed everything that I've told her and I've taught her, and that's totally changed my opinion on recruitment for people within the business. To be honest with you, I think that I'd be more keen to take brand new, fresh starters into the industry than I probably will now people that have been in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, just because they understand my way of doing things. listening to this girl on the phone, when she's negotiating, it's like I'm speaking. It's brilliant.
It's a great point. I mean, like Rob, who is one of our elite performance coaches, he's got a great background in agency, and I remember him telling me that he worked with us at Iceberg. He helped us when we were building Lifecycle, and then he went back to agency, and then he sort of reversed out of that and came back to work at Iceberg. But he was saying in that period where he was back in agency, he employed a new member of staff who had not done agency before, and told her how it was going to be done, and showed her the life cycle, and just told her what fee they charge, and she would just go out and get 1.5%. Like, it wasn't something whereby he hadn't told her do your best. He'd said, this is what we charge.
Yeah.
And she just went and did it.
Didn't question it.
Yeah, didn't question it. And so it's a great point. People talk about, often you see adverts saying like, I need someone who's got 5 years estate agency experience. Like, why? It's not rocket science. I mean, like you said at the beginning, you went from knocking on doors to then being their lister and their value. It's not that difficult, is it? 3 months worth of maybe like not. Showing somebody this is how what we're presenting. This is the offer we're presenting to people, and this is the tasks that you do while you're in the office. So it's a very good point, especially seeing as there's probably so many people from hospitality industry and hotel industry and all of that sort of thing that are probably out of work or looking for work at the moment.
And I think you're right. I've got the first employee that joined me, and he's got such a good grounding of estate agency, knows the processes, knows the legislation, and he's a rock. But then the new girl that's working with me now, I think that it's totally changed my opinion of it, and I think you need a bit of a balance of both. But I think for people that are coming in to work within the office and be that sort of traditional kind of negotiator type role, fresh starters all the way.
Without wanting to digress away from the story too much, just quickly, do you think that the reason that agents don't like to do that is because they're not confident in their own processes and training facilities, whereby they think to themselves like, okay, I take on a new starter, but what are they going to do? Like, who's going to train them? Who's going to look after them? Do you think that that's maybe the issue? I know certainly from my perspective, there was a point on my business journey where I was taught about what assets has the company got in terms of what's in your head and what's physically down. Like, where's your procedures? Where's your training docs? How do I know what to do when I come and work for you?
Well, I think the reality is that a lot of agencies don't really have them. They don't really have a defined training program or process. And I think for a lot of estate agency owners, trying to teach someone the ropes and get them to a level where they're competent, they probably just think, that's a bit of a pain in the arse. Let's just get someone who's already got the experience. But in my experience now, I don't think that's the best way of doing things.
Okay, so coming back to the story, so we've gone on this journey whereby you've taken the plunge, you've decided Lifecycle's the way to go. You've got over the challenges with the staff not adopting people that have used softwares previously and having to try and show them how to make their life easier, not just your goals as a business owner. Can you think of a point whereby it's stopped being, hopefully this might pay off one day? I'm not saying that £1 million just arrived in your bank, or someone dragged you into their house and say, I want to put their house on the market with you, but a point whereby you didn't feel like you did with that old software, whereby it's like, these are broken promises, where at the point where you thought, this is going to work out the way that we were told it's going to work out.
I mean, to be honest with you, I noticed and we noticed a difference pretty much immediately. We'd gone from a startup which had just over a dozen boards out on the road, and then we built a bit of market share throughout that year. But when we started to use the Lifecycle system towards the back end of last year, and I think it was a bit of a shift in mindset as well. But for 3 consecutive months, we went from being the 4th or 5th biggest agent in town in terms of market share to being number 1 on listings and sales.
Wow.
So that was kind of mind-blowing to start with. And now, you know, we get invited out regularly to valuations where we're the only agent. You know, they've seen what we do, they love what we do on social media, they love how we market properties, and we just find that, you know, they're not calling the competition on, you know, and that's happening on quite a regular basis. I think as well, for me, you know, the market appraisal reports, they look so much more professional than what anyone else is doing in our area. You know, no one else is even sending them electronically. You know, they're still going out paper-based, and you know, to be able to see when those people are visiting those market appraisals, you know, and just making those calls or sending those emails or sending those texts at the right time. You know, the difference that has. And then, you know, when we started to get to the point where you know, the automated feedback was coming in, you know, that again, phenomenal. Yeah, you know, that saves so much time in terms of making calls and sending emails. That, you know, that's been a huge time saver, and still allows us to operate, you know, at the level we are doing with a pretty streamlined team. You know, of just 3 individuals, and I don't spend a lot of time in the office. I'm generally out on the road, so you know, it's been really good.
I'll ask you something. I'll answer it honestly, because I can always cut this out. But no, seriously, an agent said to me the other day that he said, "Don't put my price up over this, but looking at it now, I would rather have the Lifecycle system than a member of staff. So, you know, if I had to choose, I'd have to keep that system." I'm not saying, you know, the current staff you've got, you need, obviously you're a small team, but can you see the thinking behind that? You know, because often someone might look and say, well, Lifecycle's going to cost me 15 grand a year. And people have said to me, I could get a junior for that. And I'm sitting there knowing Lifecycle inside out, you know, we use it, thinking, what's a junior going to do for you that like, you don't understand what I'm talking about here? Can you see that?
Yeah, I suppose I can. I just don't see any way back now. You know, I don't see how we could ever go back to not having that system, that nurturing system, the tracking systems that it's got in it. You know, I think it's now such an integral part of our business that I just wouldn't want to be without it. Now, you know, I suppose right now where I'm at with 3 members of staff, I couldn't lose.
No, of course.
But we couldn't go back. There's no way back.
And perhaps you would already be needing more staff if you didn't have that Lifecycle system.
True.
You know,
absolutely.
The viewing feedback, the registering of applicants, the chasing of market appraisals. Now that you are, you know, number 1 or number 2 or whatever it is in the area, perhaps you would already be needing to spend 15, 20, 30,000 pound a year on extra stuff. Okay. When you look across now, or when your senior valuer looks across, either of you, at that company that, you know, he wants to beat, do you have more confidence now that, like, it's a given? They're using whatever system it is, some old system in the estate agency. They're sending letters, you mentioned before, and you guys are already planning for 2022, 2023, already building data for that. Do you look across and sort of have a air of confidence about that?
Yeah, I mean, we are hot on their tails right now. You know, I mean, it's literally a couple of units. You know, and we're at September. There's still the rest of the year to go. I think we can take them by the end of the year. But the agency in question is a very traditional agency. You know, they're using an old-fashioned CRM system. They're doing everything paper-based. You know, they're still operating in the same way that they did 25, 30 years ago. And not only that, you know, we're on the tails, but we're charging higher fees than they are. And that's something else that's changed while we've been using Lifecycle as a system, is that we've, you know, increased our fees quite considerably. And we're now quite proud to be the most expensive agent in the town.
Awesome.
But also, you know, having a really good solid market share as well.
Yeah, love it. Fantastic. If there's anybody out there that's listening to this that thinks, oh, I would like to ask Mark something, what's the best way? I think you're a member of the Estate Agency Facebook group.
Right,
so
yeah.
Are you happy for people to sort of add you on Facebook and reach out to you if they wanted to?
Yeah, sure. Facebook's the main place that you can find me, or Instagram. And if someone was to search either Mark Nicholson or the Retford Estate Agent, then they'll be able to find me, and feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming in. Hope you enjoyed it.